Welcome back, everyone. This channel exists because of your incredible support. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's story. 4 years together, and I thought I knew Megan better than I knew myself. Turns out I was dead wrong about that, just like I was wrong about thinking our anniversary dinner would actually be about us. It started 2 weeks ago when Megan suggested we celebrate our 4-year anniversary at the Wharf, that trendy waterfront spot in Charleston. I'd been picturing something quieter, just the two of us at that little Italian restaurant on King Street we both loved. Something intimate where we could actually talk, maybe remember what brought us together in the first place. But she wanted to invite friends, make it a whole group thing. "It'll be fun to celebrate with the people who have watched our relationship grow," she said, flashing that smile that used to make me agree to anything. At the time, it seemed sweet, thoughtful even. We'd been together since junior year of college, and our friend group had definitely been part of our story. What I didn't realize was how carefully she'd curated that guest list. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to see them. The way she'd been distant for weeks, always checking her phone mid-conversation, angling the screen away from me like I was a stranger. How she'd started talking about the old days more often, reminiscing about college in a way that felt less like nostalgia and more like longing. The sudden interest in going out more, hitting up bars and restaurants we'd never been to together, always with work friends I'd never met. I should have paid closer attention to exactly who was on that guest list. The dinner was set for Saturday night at 7. Megan had made reservations for 8 people at one of the communal tables overlooking the Cooper River. I'd offered to handle the planning, but she insisted she had it covered. "I want it to be perfect," she'd said. I got there first, like always. Punctuality was one of those things my dad drilled into me growing up, and it had become habit. I found our table, ordered a bourbon neat, and watched the Saturday night crowd filter through the space. Families with kids running between tables, couples on dates leaning close, groups of friends celebrating something or nothing at all. Megan arrived 15 minutes later with her friend Rachel and 2 other women from her PR firm. She looked good, really good. She got her hair done that afternoon, was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something that hugged her curves in ways that seemed deliberate. Something about the whole presentation felt off, like she was dressing for someone specific. Then came my buddy Derek with his girlfriend Tanya. Derek and I had played lacrosse together in college, stayed close after graduation. He was one of those guys who could talk to anyone about anything, always made group situations easier. Tanya was sweet, an ER nurse who worked brutal hours but somehow always seemed upbeat. And finally, Connor. Connor Mitchell, Megan's college boyfriend from 5 years back. The guy she'd dated for 3 years before we met. The one she'd called her first real love early in our relationship when we were still sharing those kinds of stories. They'd broken up when he moved to Austin for some tech startup job, and she'd been devastated. I remember her telling me it took her months to get over him, months to feel like herself again, which was right around the time we started dating. I knew they'd stayed friendly on social media over the years, the occasional birthday post, a congratulations on a promotion here and there. What I didn't know was that he'd moved back to Charleston 8 weeks ago. What I really didn't know was that Megan had been in constant contact with him since he got back. When I asked Megan about Connor being there while we were ordering drinks, casual as I could manage, she gave me that dismissive shrug she'd perfected over the years. "Rachel mentioned he was back in town and suggested inviting him," she said, stirring her cocktail with the little plastic straw. "He's been gone for 5 years. It's not like he has a huge social circle here anymore. I thought it would be nice." Made sense, I guess. We were all adults, ancient history and all that. But watching them interact during the appetizer course, I noticed things that made my stomach tighten. The way they fell into easy conversation, finishing each other's sentences like no time had passed. How she laughed at his jokes a little too loud, leaned in a little too close when he was talking. The way her hand kept finding excuses to touch his arm. And Connor looked exactly like the kind of guy Megan had always been attracted to before me. Tall, confident, that easy charm that made every conversation feel effortless. He wore success like a second skin, expensive watch, designer jeans, the kind of casual confidence that comes from never having to worry about money or rejection. I caught myself comparing us and hated it. I'm not an insecure guy, never have been. But sitting there watching Megan light up in a way I hadn't seen in months, I started to understand why people talk about feeling invisible in their own relationships. The first hour went fine, though. Good food, decent conversation, everyone catching up on work and life and all the normal stuff. The restaurant was buzzing with energy, servers weaving between tables with trays of craft cocktails, the kitchen sending out plates that looked like art. I was actually starting to relax. Maybe this group thing had been a good idea after all. Maybe I was overthinking the Connor situation. Then Rachel started drinking. And when Rachel drinks, everything becomes a joke to her. She was sitting across from Megan, getting louder with each glass of rosé. The conversation had drifted to relationships, commitment, the future, all that stuff that happens when you get couples together. Someone made a comment about how lucky Megan and I were to have found each other so young. That's when Rachel lit up like she'd been waiting for this moment all night. "Oh, Megan's so smart, though," she said, practically shouting over the restaurant noise. "She's got her replacement right here if Jake ever screws up." She gestured toward Connor, who was sitting 2 seats down from Megan. The table went quiet for a beat, then Rachel kept going, encouraged by the attention. "Seriously, it's like the perfect backup plan. Connor's single, he's back in town, and look at him." She waved her wine glass in his direction. Megan could just swap them out if she needed to. Everyone laughed. Even Megan. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable giggle. A genuine, amused laugh like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. I looked around the table. Derek was chuckling awkwardly. Tanya was covering her mouth, trying not to smile. The other PR friends were nodding along like this was some brilliant observation. And Connor was leaning back in his chair with this confident smirk like he was enjoying every second of it, not embarrassed, not awkward. Pleased. For just a moment, everything else faded. The restaurant noise, the conversations at other tables, the clinking glasses and laughter, all of it just disappeared. I was watching Megan's face, waiting for her to shut it down, to say something like "that's not funny" or "don't be ridiculous." She didn't. She was still smiling, looking between Rachel and Connor like they'd all shared some inside joke I wasn't part of. That's when it hit me. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been discussed. I set down my drink and looked directly at Rachel. "Sounds like you've all talked this through." The laughter stopped, Rachel's smile faltered, Megan's face went pale. I stood up, reached into my pocket, and pulled off the promise ring I'd been wearing for 2 years. I'd given it to her after we moved in together, a symbol of commitment while we figured out our future. It felt heavier than usual as I walked around the table to where Connor was sitting. He wasn't smirking anymore. His eyes went wide as I stopped next to his chair and held out the ring. "Then there's no point dragging this out," I said. And I dropped the ring into his palm. He just stared at it like I'd handed him a live grenade. I turned to Megan. "You wanted a backup plan. Congratulations, now you don't need one." The entire restaurant section had gone quiet. Other diners were staring. A server who'd been approaching our table stopped mid-step, tray frozen in his hands. I didn't wait for anyone to respond. I walked straight through the restaurant, past the bar, out into the humid Charleston night. Behind me, I could hear chairs scraping, voices starting to overlap. The whole dinner dissolving into chaos. My truck was parked in the lot across the street. I sat in it for a minute, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. My phone was already buzzing with texts. I didn't look at them. Instead, I drove to Mount Pleasant, to my best friend Marcus's house. Marcus answered his front door, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without a word. "Beers are in the fridge," he said. "Game's on in 5 minutes." That's the thing about having a friend who's been through his own relationship disaster. He knows when to talk and when to just hand you a drink and turn on the TV. I crashed on his couch that night, didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that moment at the table, Megan laughing while her friends talked about swapping me out like I was some interchangeable part. The next morning, I turned off my phone and blocked Megan's number. Whatever she had to say could wait until I was ready to hear it. Sunday morning, Marcus made coffee and sat down across from me at his kitchen table. He'd already been up for hours, was the kind of guy who ran 5 miles before most people hit snooze. His house in Mount Pleasant was small but comfortable, the kind of place that actually felt like a home instead of just somewhere to store stuff. You going to tell me what happened, or do I have to guess? So I told him everything: the dinner, the guest list, Connor showing up out of nowhere, the way Megan had been different for weeks, distant and distracted, the joke that wasn't really a joke, the ring, walking out. When I finished, he just nodded slowly, the way he did when he was processing something serious. Good, he said finally, you did the right thing. Doesn't feel right. It never does at first. He refilled his coffee from the pot on the counter. But let me ask you something. How long have you felt like something was off? That question hit harder than I expected. Because the truth was, it had been weeks, maybe longer. Megan had been distant since March, right around the time Connor moved back to town, though I hadn't connected those dots until now. We barely talked anymore, and when we did, it was just surface stuff: who was picking up groceries, what bills needed paying, whether we were still going to her cousin's wedding in May. Nothing real, nothing that mattered. She's been different since early March, I said. We barely hang out anymore. And when we do, she's always checking her phone or talking about stuff that doesn't include me. Her work friends, people from college I don't know, memories I wasn't part of. And this Connor guy, when did he show up in the picture? I had to think about it. Megan had mentioned running into someone from college about 8 weeks ago, said they'd grabbed coffee to catch up. She'd been vague about who it was, and I hadn't pressed for details. Why would I? We both stayed in touch with college friends over the years. She mentioned running into him about 8 weeks ago, I said they'd grabbed coffee to catch up. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Coffee led to anniversary dinner invitations pretty quick. He was right. And sitting in his kitchen that Sunday morning, I started thinking about all the other things I'd noticed but explained away. The new clothes she'd been buying, stuff that was more stylish than her usual work wardrobe. The way she'd started doing her hair differently, spending more time getting ready in the mornings. The spin classes she'd joined but never wanted to talk about afterward. Hell, even the anniversary dinner itself. 4 years together, and we'd never done a big group celebration before. Our previous anniversaries had been quiet, just us. Dinner somewhere nice, maybe a weekend trip to Savannah or Hilton Head. Private celebrations for something that felt private. But this year, she'd wanted an audience. I need to go back to the apartment, I said, get some of my stuff. You sure that's smart right now? She'll be at work tomorrow, I'll go then. Marcus studied me for a moment. You want company? No, I need to do this by myself, but thanks. He understood. Marcus had been through his own divorce 2 years earlier when his ex-wife decided she needed to find herself with her CrossFit instructor. He knew the importance of those first few decisions, how they set the tone for everything that came after. Whatever you find in that apartment, he said, remember that you already know enough. You don't need more evidence to justify what you felt in that restaurant. He was right. But I didn't need more evidence to justify leaving. I needed it to understand how long I'd been living in a fantasy. Monday morning, I waited until 8:30, then drove back to our place in the French Quarter, the historic district of Charleston, not Louisiana. The apartment complex was quiet, most people already at work. I'd been living there for 2 years, but driving up to it now felt strange, like visiting a place I used to know but had somehow become foreign. Her car was gone from the parking spot we shared. Good, I wasn't ready for a confrontation, wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for one. The apartment looked exactly like we'd left it Saturday before dinner. Our coffee cups from that morning were still in the sink, mine with the chip on the handle, hers with lipstick on the rim. Her purse was on the kitchen counter where she always dropped it, along with her tablet and the stack of mail she'd been meaning to sort through for weeks. Walking through the living room felt like touring a museum of a relationship. Photos of us on the bookshelf, from our second date at the aquarium, from last year's trip to Asheville, from Derek and Tanya's engagement party. All those moments that had felt so significant when they happened, now just evidence of time that had passed. I went to the bedroom and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, anything I'd need for more than a few days. My clothes took up about half the closet, and packing them left obvious gaps that made the space look abandoned. I tried not to think about what it would feel like for Megan to come home to those empty hangars. While I was in the closet, I could hear her tablet buzzing with notifications from the kitchen. Text messages, probably friends checking in about what had happened at dinner, or maybe Megan reaching out to people, trying to control the narrative. I shouldn't have looked. I know that now, knew it then too. But curiosity won out over ethics, and I walked back to the kitchen where the tablet was lighting up every few minutes. It was still logged into her messaging apps, and right there on the lock screen were preview snippets of conversations with Connor. My stomach dropped before I even unlocked the device. The full conversations were worse than I'd imagined. Not because they were explicitly romantic, but because they were intimate in a way that felt more threatening than physical attraction. These were the kinds of conversations Megan and I used to have in the early days of our relationship, when we'd stay up talking until 2 a.m. about everything and nothing. Weeks of late-night texts about life, work, dreams, disappointments, inside jokes that referenced shared memories I wasn't part of, complaints about me, about how I didn't understand her anymore, about how different things had been when she was younger and more spontaneous. One exchange from 3 weeks ago made my hands shake as I read it. Megan wrote, "I'm glad you're coming to dinner Saturday. It'll be good to see you." Connor replied, "Wouldn't miss it. Been too long since we've had a real conversation." Megan wrote, "I know, I've missed having someone who gets it." Connor asked, "Gets what?" Megan answered, "Just everything, the way things used to be, the way I used to feel about myself." Connor wrote, "You mean before you settled down?" Megan replied, "That's not fair." Connor said, "Maybe not, but you used to be more fun, more alive." Megan wrote, "I'm still those things." Connor asked, "Are you?" I scrolled back further, finding conversations that went back 6 weeks, right to when they'd first met up for coffee. The progression was obvious once you saw it laid out chronologically. First, just catching up as old friends, then longer conversations about their respective relationships, with Megan confiding that she felt stuck and unfulfilled. Then Connor sharing that he was single by choice, enjoying the freedom of not being tied down. And then, inevitably, the comparison started. How different her life might have been if they'd stayed together. How she sometimes wondered if she'd chosen safety over passion. How she envied people who took risks instead of always playing it safe. I took photos of everything with my phone, screenshots that felt like collecting evidence for a trial I'd never wanted to be part of. Then I finished packing as quickly as I could and left, leaving the tablet slightly moved from its original position. Megan would know someone had been looking at it, would realize I'd seen everything. Let her wonder how much I knew and what I planned to do about it. Back at Marcus's place, I showed him the screenshots. He read through them silently, his jaw getting tighter with each conversation. "She's been planning this," he said finally, "maybe not consciously, but she's been setting up her exit strategy, testing the waters." "They haven't done anything physical," I said, though even as I said it, I knew how naive it sounded. "That's almost worse," Marcus said, looking up from my phone. "At least if it was just physical attraction, you could write it off as a moment of weakness. This is emotional. She's been comparing you to him for weeks, and you didn't even know you were in a competition." He was right. Every conversation I'd had with Megan over the past month, every time I'd tried to connect with her or make plans or just talk about our future, she'd been measuring me against memories of Connor. Against a version of herself that existed 5 years ago when she was 24 and everything felt possible. I was never going to win that competition. Because I was fighting against nostalgia, against the version of herself she missed most. I spent that week at Marcus's place getting my head straight. I called our landlord and explained the situation. The lease was in both our names, but I could be removed if Megan wanted to take over the full rent. If not, we'd both have to find somewhere else to live. 2 days later, Megan texted me through a mutual friend, since I'd blocked her number, saying she'd take over the lease. Fine by me, one less thing to worry about. That same day, I unfriended her on all social media platforms. Clean break. My phone kept buzzing with calls and texts from numbers I didn't recognize, Megan using other people's phones, probably. I ignored most of them, but Thursday afternoon I finally read one. "We need to talk, this is all a misunderstanding, I love you." I typed back, "If you want to talk, meet me at Waterfront Park tomorrow at 6 p.m. come alone. Friday evening, I got to the park early. It was one of those perfect Charleston nights, warm but not humid, the harbor stretching out toward Fort Sumter, tourists and locals mixed together along the seawall. Neutral territory. Megan showed up right on time. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back messy like she hadn't been sleeping. Good. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly, sitting down on the bench next to me. I didn't respond, just waited. "I know you're angry, you have every right to be, but I need you to understand that nothing happened with Connor. We're just friends." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken, 6 weeks of secret coffee dates, those conversations. "These aren't friendship." Her face went white. "You went through my messages. You left your tablet on the kitchen counter, it was right there." She looked down at her hands. "It's not what you think." "What is it then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been testing the waters with your ex while keeping me as your safety net." I was confused, she said. "When Connor came back, it brought up all these old feelings. I didn't know how to handle it." "So you handled it by lying to me for 6 weeks, by meeting him behind my back, by letting your friends turn our anniversary dinner into a joke about replacing me." "That wasn't planned. Rachel was drunk. She says stupid things when she drinks." I leaned forward. "Here's what I think happened. You've been talking to Connor for weeks. You told your friends about it. They thought it was funny that you had a backup option. And Saturday night was their way of testing whether I'd fight for you." She was crying now, real tears. "That's not true. Isn't it? Because if the situation was reversed, if I'd invited an ex-girlfriend to our anniversary dinner, if my friends had joked about her being my backup plan, if you'd found weeks of messages between us where I complained about you and talked about missing the past, would you call that friendship?" She didn't answer. "You wanted to see if Connor was still interested. You wanted to see if I'd compete for you. Well, now you know I don't compete for people who keep backup plans." "I love you," she whispered. "No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love having someone reliable who makes you feel secure. But if you loved me, you never would have done any of this." I stood up. "The lease is in both our names. You can take it over if you want, or we can both move out. I honestly don't care about the apartment or the furniture or any of it. I just want out." "What about Connor?" I almost laughed. "That's not my problem anymore. You're both free to figure out whatever it is you want." "That's not what I wanted." "Then what did you want? To keep me around while you figured out if something better would come along, to have your cake and eat it too?" She didn't answer. Because we both knew that's exactly what she'd wanted. I walked away from that bench and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I found my own place. A small apartment downtown near the Charleston Museum. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Moving from our shared place in the French Quarter to somewhere completely new felt symbolic. No neighborhood memories, no familiar restaurants where we'd eaten together, no ghosts around every corner. One bedroom, decent kitchen, big windows that let in actual sunlight. The kind of place where I could think clearly without every corner reminding me of shared decisions and compromised dreams. Clean slate, no shared history. Marcus helped me haul my stuff upstairs, and we ordered pizza afterward, sitting on the floor of my empty living room and eating off paper plates because I hadn't bought furniture yet. "How does it feel?" he asked, looking around at the blank walls and empty shelves. "Like starting over," I said, but in a good way. Work became my refuge over the next few weeks. I threw myself into projects I'd been putting off, picked up extra responsibilities that other people didn't want. There's something therapeutic about solving problems that actually have solutions, about putting in effort and seeing direct results. My supervisor, David, noticed the change, called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon and asked if everything was okay at home. "Actually," I said, "I'm not living at home anymore. Megan and I broke up." "I'm sorry to hear that," he said, "but if I'm being honest, you seem more focused lately. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. There's a promotion coming up and you're at the top of my list." 3 weeks later, he called me back into his office. "Congratulations," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Senior project manager position is yours if you want it. 20% raise, better benefits, your own team." I stared at the folder for a moment, then smiled. I want it. For the first time in years, I felt like I had direction at work, purpose that wasn't tied to someone else's approval or happiness. I started running again too. Early mornings along the Battery before the heat got too intense. It was something I'd done religiously in college but had stopped somewhere along the way, probably when Megan mentioned she didn't like that I was always sweaty and tired on weekend mornings. Preferred that we sleep in together and then go to brunch with her friends. Now I remembered why I'd loved it. The quiet, the rhythm, the way problems seemed to solve themselves when you weren't actively thinking about them. Just me and the road and the sunrise over Charleston Harbor. 6 weeks after moving into my new place, I joined a recreational beach volleyball league on Sullivan's Island. Wednesday evening games, mixed teams, people who played for fun rather than glory. I'd played in high school and was rusty as hell, but it felt good to be part of something again. Something that had nothing to do with couple friends or dinner parties or navigating relationship dynamics. Made some new friends too, people who didn't know anything about Megan or the whole mess. It felt liberating to be around people who saw me as just Jake, not half of a couple, not someone recovering from drama. There was Tyler, an accountant who could spike a volleyball like he was personally offended by it. Maya, a pediatrician with 2 kids who treated Wednesday nights like her personal vacation from chaos. And then there was Sophie. Sophie Chen, a high school English teacher who'd been playing in the league for 2 years. She'd become one of the regular team captains and had this way of making everyone feel included, even the people who sucked at sports. Which at first definitely included me. About a month after I joined the league, I got a call from Derek, one of the guys from our old friend group. I almost didn't answer. Wasn't sure I wanted updates on people who'd sat there laughing while my relationship got turned into entertainment. But curiosity won out. Thought you should know, he said without preamble. That whole thing with Megan and Connor, it lasted about 3 weeks. I wasn't surprised. What happened? Turns out he wasn't actually interested in anything serious. He liked the attention, the ego boost of knowing she was into him. But when it became real, when she was actually available and expecting something to develop, he bylayed. So she lost both of us. Pretty much, she's been reaching out to people in the group trying to get sympathy, saying she made a mistake and wants to fix things. Most of us aren't buying it. What happened at that dinner was messed up, man. We should have said something. Why didn't you? Derek was quiet for a moment. Honestly, because it was Megan. She's always been the center of attention in our group. Always got her way. And Rachel was drunk and loud, and it felt easier to just go along with it than cause a scene. But you knew it was wrong. Yeah, we knew, he paused. Connor gave me the ring, by the way, asked me to return it to you. It's at my place if you want it back. Keep it, sell it, throw it away, I don't care. After he hung up, I sat in my new apartment looking out at the city lights, processing what he'd told me. Part of me felt vindicated, knowing that Connor had turned out to be exactly what I'd suspected, someone who enjoyed the chase but wasn't interested in commitment. But mostly, I just felt relief that I'd trusted my instincts and walked away before things got worse. Derek had also mentioned that Rachel felt terrible about the whole thing, had been asking mutual friends if they thought I'd ever forgive her. The answer was probably not. Some jokes aren't really jokes, and some moments can't be taken back. The other PR friends from the dinner had apparently distanced themselves from Megan after that night. Turns out, watching someone publicly humiliate their partner makes for awkward office dynamics, even when you'd laughed along at the time. I didn't gloat, didn't feel satisfaction about Megan's situation. I just felt grateful that I wasn't part of it anymore. Around that same time, I started talking more with Sophie at volleyball. She'd always been friendly to new players, part of what made her a good team captain, but I'd been too focused on just getting through each day to really connect with anyone. There was something about her that stood out beyond her athletic ability. She was funny in a dry, observational way, direct without being harsh, the kind of person who said what she meant and meant what she said. After one particularly brutal game where our team got destroyed by a group of former college players, we ended up at the bar next to the beach with a few other people. Normal post-game ritual, nothing romantic. But somehow, Sophie and I ended up in a corner booth talking while everyone else played pool and complained about missed serves. "You're different from the other guys in this league," she said, sipping a beer and studying me with those teacher eyes that probably missed nothing. "How so?" "Most of the single guys here are either fresh out of bad breakups and bitter about it, or they're looking for rebounds and treating every conversation like a job interview. You seem settled, like you know who you are." I thought about that, about the person I'd been months ago, constantly trying to anticipate Megan's moods, second-guessing my own instincts, feeling like I was failing some test I didn't understand. "I learned not to settle for being someone's maybe," I said. She nodded like that made perfect sense. "Good lesson." We started hanging out outside of volleyball after that. Nothing formal, nothing rushed. Coffee before weekend games, dinner after particularly good wins, easy conversations that didn't feel like auditions or negotiations. She was different from Megan in ways that took me time to appreciate. Direct where Megan had been passive-aggressive, comfortable with silence where Megan had needed constant stimulation, independent in a way that felt secure rather than distant. 3 months into whatever we were calling it, Sophie and I were walking along Folly Beach on a Saturday evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The kind of perfect low country evening that makes you understand why people move here and never leave. "Can I ask you something?" she said, noticing I'd gotten quiet. "Jude, what happened with your ex? I know it's none of my business, but you've never really talked about it, and I'm curious what kind of person would let you go." So I told her, not all the details, but the broad strokes. The anniversary dinner that became a public humiliation. The backup plan that wasn't really a joke, walking away rather than fighting for someone who wasn't sure she wanted me. Sophie listened without interrupting, asking questions only when she needed clarification. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves roll in. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said finally, "but I'm also kind of grateful." "Why?" "Because it taught you what you won't tolerate. That's rare. Most people are so afraid of being alone that they'll accept almost anything." I was afraid of being alone, too, I admitted, but I was more afraid of losing myself. She smiled and leaned against my shoulder. "Smart choice." A year after that anniversary dinner, I was sitting in my apartment on a Saturday morning when a message request popped up on social media. Megan's name in that little gray bubble, which meant we weren't connected anymore. I stared at it for a long moment, coffee getting cold in my hand. I could delete it without reading it, pretend I'd never seen it. Probably should have, honestly. But curiosity had always been my weakness. I opened it. "I know I have no right to reach out and you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this even if you don't respond. You were right about everything. I was keeping you as a safety net while I figured out my feelings about Connor. I was comparing our life to memories that weren't even real anymore. The dinner wasn't supposed to humiliate you. I thought I could test how I felt by seeing you both together. And when Rachel started with those jokes, I should have stopped it, but part of me wanted to see if you'd fight for me. It wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I read it 3 times, waiting to feel something: anger, sadness, vindication, anything. But all I felt was a kind of distant sympathy, like reading about someone else's problems in a newspaper. I typed back, "I am." 2 words, that was all she needed to know. I didn't tell her about Sophie, about the promotion I'd gotten at work, about the downtown apartment I loved, about the life I'd built. My happiness wasn't about her anymore, wasn't defined by her absence or her approval. I deleted the conversation thread and went back to my coffee. Later that afternoon, Sophie and I were driving to Savannah for the weekend. We'd rented a place near Forsyth Park. Simple plans with someone who'd chosen me first consistently without needing backup options or exit strategies. That evening, walking hand in hand down River Street while tourists took photos and street performers played jazz, I realized something I probably should have understood months earlier. That anniversary dinner had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed the humiliation or the heartbreak, but because it forced me to stop settling for less than I deserved. It taught me the difference between being someone's choice and being someone's option, between someone who loved me and someone who loved the idea of having me around. "What are you thinking about?" Sophie asked, noticing I'd gotten quiet. "Just grateful," I said, "for a lot of things." She squeezed my hand and didn't ask for details, secure enough not to need explanations for every thought that crossed my mind. Later that night, sitting on the balcony of our rented apartment with the city lights twinkling below, I thought about the person I'd been a year ago. Someone who would have fought for a relationship that was already over, who would have accepted being a backup plan rather than being alone. That version of me felt like a stranger now, someone I used to be before I learned what it actually meant to choose myself first. My phone was silent in my pocket. My mind was clear. The future felt open and full of possibilities I didn't have to share with anyone who wasn't sure they wanted to be part of them. And for the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. Dear listeners, that's our story for today. If it resonated with you, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. And drop a comment below. Have you ever walked away from a situation where you realized you were someone's backup plan? How did you handle it? See you next time.